Welcome to another edition of Talking with Kevin and Son, brought to you by RMK Productions and the 10 United Podcast Network and RMK Productions TV. Through the power of story, our mission is to uplift through the voices, inspired, and experiences and perspectives using the framework of teaching, learning, and modeling. Our purpose is hope, helping other people every single day. And today, we have a very special guest with a very special topic. Our topic today is going to be authentic diversity, equality, and inclusion. I have here, and you can correct me on your bio, um, an award-winning author, educator, paid speaker, mother of four, Miss Laquita Middleton. Welcome to Talking with Kevin and Son. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, and thank you so much for having me.
All right, all right. Hopefully, I got everything as far as your background. You earned a bachelor's degree in Black Studies at Berea College. Am I right?
It's Berea.
Berea College, and you founded a civil rights tour education for Visionary Civil Rights Heritage Tour, and also, when we talk about creating as a speaker, the strategies and organizing, you created another program for social justice called Stop Black Hate. Can you tell me about a little bit about Stop Black Hate before we actually get into the show topic?
Oh, yes, sure. Well, Stop Black Hate is an organization that I founded in April of this year, 2021. And it is an organization that seeks to stop Black hate within the Black community and from outside of the Black community. So, of course, it's like putting pressure on the outside community to stop hating Black people, stop hating us, but then also putting the responsibility and accountability back into the Black community to stop doing things that are detrimental to our community. So it was working on both ends of the spectrum.
Quick question: Who hates
Mhm.
Black people?
What was that?
Who hates Black people?
Well, in my experience in this world is that in my few years of living in this world is that a lot of people hate Black people. They love the culture, but they hate the people. And that's the experience that we have had in the history of our being here in the United States.
All right. Um, an award-winning author uh, of the spoken word. I've had a lot of conversation with people about spoken word before we get into DEI. Give us a little background on your affiliation with the spoken word and this award. I want to make sure I promote you and give you your roses while you're here.
Thank you. So I started with spoken word because number one, I've always been a writer. I love words. I love teaching ever since preschool. Don't get me started. But once I got my degree in Black Studies, I wanted to know how can I actually teach Black Studies in a way that uninterested people, Black and white and other, could actually learn the information, retain the information, and be inspired to do something else. So I can give a 1 hour lecture, but how much of that 1 hour lecture, those 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 words, are they going to actually remember? So I thought back to when I was in high school and college, and I had to recite these long poems and long monologues and such. And my English class, because I was in advanced English, so I said, okay, why don't I start writing my own Black history oriented spoken word? So when I would go places, that's how I would open up. Or I would go places and I'm always talking about Black history and civil rights. So when people invited me or when they saw that I was on a program, they would say, oh, yeah, she's going to teach us something about Black history today. And one of my old signature poems was a poem called Nappy Hair. And you will not believe how many times I went into Walmart or the gas station or just some random place in the community and someone would say, oh, I remember you, you're the lady who talked about your nappy hair. And even though that's what they could remember, the fondness of the history that I taught them, that's something that it's kind of like a seed that was planted. So I might not teach them the whole of Black history in one setting, but when they hear something, a seed is going to drop into their spirit and hopefully it'll be watered by other people that they come upon.
Now, I know we haven't prepared for this, but since you brought it up, and since this is one of those things that I want to make sure we share, because the people that follow and listen to this podcast, it comes from a variety of backgrounds, education, financial. Um, I would love to hear that poem. You knew I was going to ask that, didn't you?
Yes, but I haven't done that poem in so long. Oh my Jesus. I'll just do a little part that I remember. It's really just maybe a few lines.
All right.
But it starts off, not to sound sappy, but I like to wear my hair nappy, free of all perms, relaxes the heat of the straightening comb. It's just too reminiscent of hot days under the master. If you want me to be happy, style my hair in no way but nappy. Give me a scoop of ether, 9 locks or twist, either's fine, honey. You can don me and Angela. But before you open your mandible, let me tell you that the world judges you by the tangible. So that's a little bit.
That's all
That's a
right.
little bit.
All right. All right. All right. I hope you guys enjoy that. Now we're going to dive in. Diversity, equity, and inclusion seems to be a hot topic. You know, I've had going through COVID many conversations from corporations that want to dive into this conversation. And I always say many of the conversations that I've had, um, it's like lighting a match at one end and blowing smoke out of the other. When I hear corporations or learn of stories when a company goes public because an image of one of their employees shows up in blackface and they decide that they have a zero tolerance for this and it was insensitive, that they remove this person from employment, but there's two people in that picture, and later to discover that the senior executive is still employed at this company. Is this a smokescreen or is it just another hot topic? Or maybe corporations are now adding on to this because we've become a little bit more sensitive. When a client calls a corporation and says, look, I want your best team on this, but I want to make sure that the people working on this project reflect what we believe in. And so we're looking for more diversity. And the company fails to realize that they just sent out their own diverse team on another client that requires the same thing. Or maybe a company doesn't realize the reason why a senior executive, a minority senior executive, turned down a position. And when they call to ask why, the person says, I have trouble working for a company when no one in the company looks anything like me. Now, what's the reason? Is this just a conversation of talking about diversity? Can a company police their own self? Or I've experienced and watched a person of Caucasian persuasion sit in front of a group of people of color, both Black and brown, teaching diversity, equity, and inclusion. Can that be taught? So the first question I'm going to ask you, can this conversation be created and duplicated and create change in the workplace or in our education system by someone that does not understand the plight of where the conversation originates? I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, I was just start with the basics of this conversation, and that's really is, do people actually think this? Do they think that the world should be diverse? And do they think that their world, which is like their communities, their companies, like where they go shopping and all of that, should that be diverse, reflecting the different peoples of the world? Should that, well, if they are diverse, should they include them into their lives? And then if they include other people and say, okay, I'll accept that Black person over here, I'll accept that woman over here, I'll accept that Hispanic or Latino over here, or Asian person over here, or people of other races and ethnic backgrounds. But then does that really mean that they believe that they should have an equitable place in the decision making of their company, their community, or what have you? And when it comes down to it, a lot of people in power, I'll let you determine who they are. When a lot of people in power, they don't want to give up their power. They think that when when they have to share power or they're being asked to share power in any type of way, a lot of them, not all, a lot of them will say, well, yeah, they'll say they're okay, but in actions, their actions show that they really, really don't. And when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in a company, a lot of people think, oh, well, I got my one African American over there. And that's literally what former President Trump actually said on a microphone in front of all of the cameras for the entire world to see. It's like, oh, no, I'm not racist. I got my African American over there. So we know that the company that he ran, of course, we know for real, but it's not one that includes diversity. It is not, well, it may include diversity because of that one African American that he knew. But then does he really believe that that African American could be equitable to him or equal to him? Should they be included in the decision making of his whole campaign? Or even if you're talking about an executive with a company, should a Black person, an Asian person, a Hispanic Latino person, should a woman, a person who is physically or mentally challenged, should they have the same rights as the people who are in power at that particular company? And when you're looking at a lot of companies, you don't see that. When you're looking at the school, I was a teacher for 7 years in the school system in Alabama, in Arkansas for a summer, and then here in Texas. And when I say that there's racism all throughout the lessons, and I was a history teacher too, so I was seeing it all this time, all the time, all the time. And I see, for example, here, and I know we'll get into it later, in the education system, is that I will see how so much money and so many resources are put behind teaching English as a second language, specifically to Hispanic and Latino students, because the same push is not between Haitian immigrants, African immigrants, who have, other people from other countries who speak English as a second language, but how much money and resources is put behind Hispanic and Latino kids to actually learn English and become proficient speakers and learners of English than they do other races and group of people. And even for the native English speakers, who our kids, they might not just know the language because they're already going to poor schools or underserved schools, and they have behavioral issues, and they have behavior issues because their home life is bad, or for any other reasons, but they still don't know the language. So you're still putting African American people who are citizens, you're putting them at a disadvantage just because you're putting more resources into ensuring that people from other countries, specifically Hispanic and Latino, especially here in Texas, you're putting so much money and resources behind them to succeed, but you're leaving behind the people who are here who are not Hispanic and Latino. So I'll land my plane there.
Let's be clear, all right? Because I want to make sure everyone understands when we talk about, I don't want to talk about those people. I don't want to talk about they. I want to talk, I want to open on the conversation. We have to realize that the people that run the Fortune 500 company in most of the countries that we know of, and the brands that we support, are run by white males and some white females. So when we talk about the conversation and the historical discrimination against minorities, Black and brown, Asian, gender, and so forth, we're talking about white males and white people. So I can't recognize them as they, because the only way we get people to change or this system to work to where that we have diversity, equity, and inclusion for all is that we address the conversation and allow the conversation to create an action plan for change. All right, so going forward, when we talk about this problem, we have to identify where the problem is and understand that some of my listeners are white, some of my listeners are Asian, some of my listeners are gender specific. And the reason why my background has multicolors, and then on the lighter side is to take that education of what we learn and educate other people in order for change to happen. So it may be uncomfortable for some people to have this conversation, and even though that they may not feel that they are part of the problem by not stepping up. They are the problem, and we have to identify that. So we can go on through the history of civil rights, but I want to break down in your terms, all right, diversity, and then we're going to go to equity and then inclusion. So people will understand what diversity is in the workplace. How do we get that versus the conversation? Because right now, everyone has someone that's appointed to be a specialist in this field. And I firmly believe that if you have someone that within your system that is not qualified, and just because of the color of their skin, or that they have read a couple of books, or they have an association with someone that is a different race for them, that they are now an expert. I don't think when you have a problem within your organization that you can police yourself, because otherwise the problem would not exist within itself. So let's talk about diversity.
Okay, I would like to just say that with diversity, excuse me, diversity is basically, you know how people always talk about having a seat at the table? And
Yeah.
usually you know, that every member of the table is white. Like even if you look at the famous painting of Jesus and his disciples, everybody is just white at the table, you know. So when I think of diversity, I think of diversity being people sitting at that table or at this imaginary table that people talk about, and they represent different people. They represent different ideas, because just because somebody is white doesn't mean that they're racist, doesn't just because somebody is black doesn't mean that they're, you know, whatever is, you need to have that diverse, those diverse ideas, the diverse people there, and it's just like different people. So you'll have some Asians there, you'll have Black people there, you'll have rich people there, you'll have poor people there, you'll have people from other countries there, like who were like maybe born in another country, represented there. You know, you'll just have real diversity. So really, in my mind, I look at diversity as a big conglomeration of what the world looks like sitting down at this one table. So when we move into, and when I'm gonna skip over equity just quickly and go to inclusion. So when I look at inclusion, it's more than just, okay, now we're including these diverse people to be a part of our boards, to be a part of the decision makers at our company.
Can I stop you for a second?
Yes.
Why are we skipping over?
I wanted to do inclusion first because it goes with diversity, my definition of diversity.
Go ahead.
So and of course, I'm a civil rights head, so, you know, I'm not gonna, you know, skip over equity. Well, I'm not gonna omit it rather. But when it comes to inclusion, it's like now these people are included into the discussion about whatever the issue is. But what I have seen and what I talked about with you earlier, maybe a few weeks ago, was that a lot of times, even when we're talking about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, a lot of people have taken that equity out. And if you can go and do a Google search, you will see DEI and you will see D and I. So diversity and inclusion versus diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it's making you think that that equitable piece, they don't want that equitable piece because they feel like they, as in people in power, they, as in those white men that we were actually talking about, they feel like in order for me as a Black woman to get power, me as a woman to get power, you know, any other quote unquote person to get power, they have to give up some. And they are not about to give up anything. So they want to take that whole equity portion out and say, hey, well, we that's my African American over there. Well, I have a Black friend, so I'm not racist. And it's like, oh, I don't have these racist ideals because we have two people of color on our board. We're making progress because 10 years ago, we would not have even thought about having two people of color on our board. You know, and then when it comes to that equitable piece, I'm thinking more of like those ideas that are being brought forth at the table. So you can, I think all of your viewers and your listeners can even think about like going over to somebody's house, right? And like they're feeding you something to eat, but then they weren't even conscious of like maybe the things that you like to eat. So you're going over here eating rabbit, you're eating snake, you're eating turtle, you know, all of these like these things, and you're looking like, oh my God, I'm gonna be starving by the time I leave this place. And it's like, no, when you are equitable, everybody's ideas are brought forth to this table. They are all discussed. They are all taken with the same value in weight. So because people always say, oh, I want a seat at the table, but when you get to the table, they mum you, they quiet you, they don't want your ideas. Now, baby, just go sit over there. Just we'll take care of it. You can sit right here. We're not gonna put you at the kids' table. We want you to sit right here, but just, you know, you're present. We have marked you present on our attendance sheet. So, but when it comes to equity, you are there, you're present because you are, you know, not a white male, and you're there at this table. You are included in the conversation, so you're not just a bystander or a stenographer taking notes for the meeting. But when you're equitable, your ideas actually matter. They're taken into consideration. If something that you say is great, and the whole group can come together and say, you know what, Laquita, that was a phenomenal idea. Phenomenal idea. We're going to put some manpower behind this, or woman power, you know, behind this, and we're going to proceed forward with that. That's when you have DEI within a company.
I ran across a quote, and it says, "We are building a product that people with diverse backgrounds can use." I think we all want a company that's made up to reflect the makeup of the people that are using our product, by the person by the name of Sheryl Sandberg. Is that diversity, equity, and equality statement hold true to business? Is that a universal statement now of someone with a greater vision?
I think yes, with somebody with a greater vision, because it's like, hey, we are putting everybody at the table, and we are taking their consideration, you know, their thoughts, their ideas, and all of that into consideration about how we can move this company forward. And it's not like, okay, we're going to sit you at the kids' table while the grown-ups handle the business. It's like, no, we're going to do this together, and we value the people who actually come, you know, who are sitting here at the table, representing all of the community that that particular company serves.
Let me ask you a question.
Mhm.
I I had interviewed someone that, because of the foundation that they had created, they said they talked about diversity. And when I looked at where their current employment was, the current employment did not reflect diversity, not even with a white female that I was interviewing, all male. When I asked her about diversity, company did not represent it. She goes, "It's a problem," even though they have a council on diversity, equality, and inclusion. But she said her foundation was a lot different. And because she found a small group of young African American or Black athletes that she added in there, I noticed a disparity between the playing field of the private school versus the playing field, which was a concrete jungle. And when I talked about, you know, diversity, I said, again, was this a conversation that we're having because it's politically correct? Or is this a conversation that has action behind it? And she goes, well, it has action behind it. And I said, even looking at your board, it does not represent one single Black female, one single Latino female. It did have an Asian female on there. But when you look at our young children, when you talk about middle school age, that are looking for where life is providing them opportunities, if they don't see people that look like them in these positions, the dream does not come alive. So the education on top of that. Well, the answer came back was one, it's hard to find qualified candidates. How does that land with you? And how do you explain the comeback to that conversation? I know my answer, but you're an expert in this. I'm a human being and a parent and a father of two daughters and a grandfather of three. How do you explain that to this person? How do we educate this person? Now, granted, I will tell you, she's a really good person, but because of her social circle has not expanded out of her lifestyle, how do we educate that person? How do we reach that person?
Well, first I'll say that my eye roll actually said my entire answer. My eye roll explained all of that. But I think that we have to, and this is something that I talked about daily in my social justice organization, Stop Black Hate. It's like we can't just talk about it because it sounds good to the ear. It sounds good because it's a sound bite that everybody is talking about right now, or it's a trend, it's a fad. Everybody's talking about Me Too. Like, I mean, you know, Me Too is a serious movement, so I'm not diminishing that at all. But like, you know, it's coming out for every single body, which if it happens, it definitely should. But when it comes to the conversation about being diverse, being equitable, being inclusive, we have to move beyond the conversation and start with the action. And when people are so comfortable with the conversation, like they're sitting on their front porch talking about it, hey girl, this is what my company is doing. They're in the boardroom, they're wherever they are talking about it. They want to seem quote unquote conscious or quote unquote woke, but it all comes down to the action. So if you are not making it, you're not putting it into practice, what you're talking about nothingness. Like everybody talks about revolution, but who's out there making the revolution happen? And this is something I used to tell work with my when I worked with my Black History clubs that I had at my schools and my students or whoever I would talk to about civil rights, is that when the revolution comes, what side of the TV will you be on? Will you be on the inside of the TV, or will you be on the outside of the TV actually rah making it happen, or going and forcing people to sign bills and doing this out there, putting foot to the street, trying to make things happen? Or will you be sitting back like, oh, I think I know him. Oh yeah. Oh girl, this is too much. Let me turn the channel. What side of the TV will you be on? And a lot of people are behind the microphone and they're just having a conversation because it's like a hot topic. It's like a hot piece to discuss. But if you're not doing anything, it's like, I might like you, I might think you're cool, but at the same time, I got to question you because you're not practicing what you're preaching. And then you're not cognizant of the fact that you're not practicing what you preach.
All right, because and the reason why I asked that, because the advice I gave her, and I'm very direct with the people in my social circle, and so when she told me that she could not find a qualified candidate, I said another story, lighting a match at one end and blowing smoke out the other. You're not looking for anyone to fill that position, and the reason why I say that is because when I have a friend that's in Las Vegas, that's head of a media company that started out at the very ground level, did not know anything about media, had no experience in media, had no experience to media, but someone gave her a chance. We all start out at the same position, no matter who we are and where we are currently in this position, knowing absolutely nothing about our job. We learn. Is hope, helping other people every day, providing an opportunity. And what I told her, I said, you find someone that's open to learning and understanding, and then give them a seat at the table, not just to sit there to keep it warm, but give them a position to where they can make a difference. Because the only way that you're going to reach that fourth and fifth grader, if they see someone that has reached where they want to be. And I say that to anyone that's listening to this conversation, is you got to provide an opportunity. You can train talent. Indeed exists, for a reason. A resume exists for a reason. It's another way of basically saying that if my name is LaShawn, Jerome, Rufus, Laquita, Lakeisha, or whatever case may be, it makes it real easy no matter how much education we have. If we didn't go to the right schools, and that's going to change thanks to Mr. Deion Sanders, because when we have the conversation that's saying, what if 2 years from now, 80% of our talented academic children that are Black and brown, 80% of our athletic children directed their talents towards a historically Black college or university? What would the landscape of education look like in 2 years? And you have to ask that. And if you look at Mr. Deion Sanders, that some of the top high school recruits are going to Jackson State. Because why? Because he provided opportunity, hope is alive. And that's what we've got to look at when we talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity. And I said it backwards is
Mhm.
DIE. Um, so
Can I say something right
you can
quick?
say whatever. This is your interview. Say whatever you want to. I'm following you.
Oh, okay, yes. But what you made me think about with that last question about, I just can't find an African American or a person of color to take this position. I just saw this interview that Tyler Perry was doing with Taraji P. Henson. And Taraji P. Henson, phenomenal actress or whatever. Tyler Perry is very, very phenomenal. But one of the things that she was having problems with is like having the proper quote for her resume, her acting resume. And even though she was so talented, has been in the game acting or whatever for 20 years, she was still getting paid far less than what her counterparts,
Counterparts.
her white and none, whatever, her white counterparts were actually getting for lead roles for, and so on. So when she was, Tyler Perry was explaining this, he was like, well, when she came to Tyler Perry Studios to do, I think it was I Can Do Bad All By Myself, where she was the lead in that movie, phenomenal movie. He actually raised her rate to where when she showed her quote unquote resume to all of these, big studio houses or whatever to get future jobs, now she has a better playing field to where she can get paid what she's worth instead of being paid what they'll just hand her under the table. And it's like, she was very, very capable. He saw her capability. He probably searched, was, doing his searching and really helping people get to the level where they need to be. And it's like, if you're really talking about DEI, a person who's concerned with that within the company, they will seek out that talent. And one of the things that he was saying in the same interview was that, he has like the biggest production studio in the country right now. I know it's in the country. I'm not sure about the world, but I know in this country it's the biggest one. And he was like, he went into colleges and actually taught the kids there, like the recent graduates. They some of the kids when they were still in college, he actually brought them over to the studios so they could actually learn the tools of the trade and the tricks of the trade, just learn, getting that firsthand experience, because he knew that when he sent them out into the world, or not when he sent them out in the world, when they went out into the world and they say, hey, I want to be in media, I want to be in production, nobody was going to hire them because they were Black, because they, come from whatever background they came from. And so instead of him just sitting back making the excuse of, well, nobody is, there are no Black people to choose from or people of color to choose from, he said, let me go into the colleges and let me train them. And that kind of complements what you were saying earlier. It's like they can be trained. And then you can create the type of person that you want in that particular position and stop giving the excuse of you can't find somebody who's qualified.
Right. And even in that genre, in that conversation, because when I heard the interview, and I'm asking, why is Taji going to the oppressor to say, give me an opportunity? The big studios, the only reason they do what they do because they see profit. And if they can get you to bite and take a little nibble while they have the whole cake, as long as you're satisfied and you don't make any noise, they'll continue to go ahead and treat you the way that um, they think you want to be treated, and not listen to the fact that you cry foul. But I will tell you, these conversations right now, there's enough wealth amongst the general population. If we created a system that provided an opportunity for someone like you and I to invest into a Tyler Perry, Taji's film, a Denzel Washington, a Michael B. Jordan film, or whatever, we would do that. And we have to stop taking our talent to people or institutions that celebrate us on the weekends, on Fridays and Saturdays, in 4 years, vote against our freedom and our opportunities. And we have to create it ourselves. We have to overcome our own biases within our own people. We're one culture, or we're multiple cultures that basically think that if I develop a product and have it shipped to your address and it ends up on the curb, and because I'm a Black owned business, that's the reason why I don't buy Black. But Amazon or Walmart, anybody else and have UPS drive by, throw it out the window or whatever, and you'll turn around and you'll order from them 15 seconds afterwards. You'll complain, but you won't stop buying, and that's because we have been pre-programmed over the years to be submissive to our own oppressors. But I also believe that we can create allyships that can support these programs. When we started RMK Productions, we said that we will provide an opportunity to have young filmmakers stream their products through us, and we do all the hard work. So there's companies out there that are doing what you and I are doing. The key thing is getting the conversations out there and letting it be available, and people giving us an opportunity to do what's best for them. All right. So let me take and segue to where this really comes from. Education. Is there diversity, equity, and inclusion in our school system? You're shaking your head. My listeners can't hear shaking your head.
I know. I was like, the word is absolutely no. One
No,
example.
go ahead and say what it is. It's hell no. Okay, it's hell no.
I still got to go to church on Sunday. All right.
You know something? The church brings up hell all day long. The matrix, people don't understand. In Ecclesiastes, a matrix basically is a woman's womb. We don't know that. They talk about that. So go ahead. You go to church. Go ahead and be honest. Our listeners looking for the truth. Is education equal and diverse, or is it inclusive? Does your child have the same education as Elon Musk?
Oh gosh, no, most definitely not. And as a career teacher and a history teacher, I actually know this to be definitely true. And well, that there is no diversity, equity, and inclusion there, because a lot of times we have the people that are in the education system as teachers, and those people who are part of administration, whether they're the principal, assistant principal, behavioral coaches, a lot of times they do not reflect the population of students that they serve. They do not reflect that. So even though there are some allies, it's like you still have the power to code switch. So we don't know whether to trust you or whether we don't know how to trust you. And then when you're dealing with children who are, really, really young, they may have feelings like, I don't like this person because they treat me this way, or they say this, and or whatever their reasons why they don't like that particular, teacher who does not look like them. Then what I always tell other teachers is that students will not learn from people that they don't like. And if the reason why they don't like you is because you have treated them in some kind of way or made them feel inferior, dumb, stupid, unintelligent, whatever negative way that you've made them feel, you're going to block them off the entire year. So by the time a higher grade teacher, because I taught middle school and high school, when I get them, now I have to work extra hard to gain their trust. And it's easier for me just because most of my students are either Black or Hispanic or Latino, regardless of what country, their family comes from. But it's easier for me, but then academically, I have to work extra hard because now I have to teach them what they didn't learn the year before and then try to teach my content within that same amount of time of one school year where they're supposed to only learn my content. So it's like when we're talking about having DEI in the school system, we don't have it because number one, most of the time, the teachers don't reflect the students that they actually teach. But then if you're looking in the content, man, I was at a school district a few years ago. I won't say where, won't identify them, but they had the grandiose idea to force, yes, and I mean force, all ninth grade students, regardless of learning ability or academic level, to take AP level courses. And I'm talking about students who were in special education, but they were in the classroom. I'm talking about students who had different learning abilities, like some students, like some students, they were like visual learners versus, they can actually, they have to make things or whatever. You had different types of learners, whether they learn fast or most of them learn very slow. And if you know anything about an AP course, it's like on the college level. So if you send your child to college that first year, that type of class, that level class was actually had in the 9th grade for kids who could barely write their names. So it's like when we're talking about, yeah, it was inclusive, but then how inclusive was it when you weren't, you were more concerned with maybe how many resources you could get, you know, just by saying that all 9th graders are taking this AP course, or, all of these things that didn't matter when you're putting the actual academics of those children at a disadvantage to where they didn't learn anything. And when you're in a college class, you can't spend half of the class dealing with behavior. No, those kids need to go into the academic level, the on-level classes, where you had some of the higher risers, the kids who are, they're learning fast and they can, they usually score the highest on the test or whatever, put those kids in an advanced class. So now both of them are having the access to learning. So even though it sounds really weird, that was like a terrible year. That entire year, only 6 students actually passed the AP test, the exam. So they only 6 students got college credit. But then it's just like, if we tell you all, if my Black mouth, along with the other Black mouths or people of color's mouths, actually told the white people in charge that, hey, this is a problem, and our students cannot succeed like this, when we have to make another plan and they refuse to listen to us, that's when DEI comes into play. Because although we're physically diverse, I'm Black, they're white, I'm a woman, they're men, or whatever, they weren't listening to us. So our voices weren't included, and our voices didn't have any weight. So we didn't have that equity in the way that our students learned. So that year, my students didn't learn anything for real in social studies because of the way the system was actually set up to make them fail.
Now, how do we combat that system when everything is predicated based on a test, when we all learn differently? I will tell you, I'm a product of the system. All right.
Mhm.
I was a great athlete. Okay. I'm not taking anything away from the teachers that I had, because I did my work, but I almost made it through college, my junior year of college, not being able to formally read or write. And I chose, at my going into my senior year of graduating from a historically Black college, to quit faking it and start to learn, start to understand the structure, start to ask questions, start to be uncomfortable. I'm one of those people that I'm an artist. I'm a visual learner. When I look at the words on the paper, it's like scrambled. I mentioned the matrix, that
Mhm.
kind of plays in my head. And it doesn't help that I have had multiple concussions playing sports, because my mind just doesn't do that. But get me in a conversation, I'll hold my own with anybody. All right, put me on the stage with anyone, I will hold my own. But we need to educate the child and not the system to the child. Do you agree with me?
I most definitely agree with you, but then as a teacher, teachers have very little power over what we do in the classroom. So in the classroom, and the last 7 years that I have taught, it's always, okay, first of all, they give us so much that we have to do in so little time. So to teach a group of 30 to 35 kids in 50 minutes, that's nearly impossible. And then of varying academic levels. So we're already putting the students at an academic disadvantage because we're forcing them to learn one specific way and learn at one specific speed. So if somebody's put me in a calculus or a trigonometry class and they expect me to learn, learn, a concept and be able to be a master of a concept in one class period, 1 50-minute period,
Mhm.
I won't learn anything. And that's probably why today I absolutely hate math. I use the other part of my brain, the
Right.
side of my brain or whatever. But then if you multiply me times a million kids that look like me across the country, it's a big disservice that we're doing to our kids in the system. And it's just like, what are they actually learning? What really are they learning? And they're not learning anything. So like even in your situation, somebody should have caught that early and should have been able to help you earlier. So I'm thankful that you had that, that wherewithal within you to say, hey, I'm going to buckle down and I'm going to do this. But there were several people who could have caught that before, or a system that should have caught it way before.
Well,
And that's
let me
we don't have any power.
let
That
me
teachers don't have power. Go ahead.
let me say this. The system that I had at home would not allow me to be labeled as special education. My grandfather, my father, my uncle Bill, my coaches. You know, my father said I had to deal with people in the regular world, so I needed to sit in class with people I had to deal with in the regular world, and he told me to learn. So he never allowed me to use what I didn't have as an excuse. And what happened is, as I started to mature, I started to take interest. And as an author, when I hear young children say, I hate reading, and then I turned to them, I said, you have yet to find a book that you loved and that you love reading. And that's the reason why when I talk about the system that we have in our education system, we need to be honest with our children, with our history and where the knowledge comes from. I spoke at a school in Dayton, Ohio, Belmont High School, many, many years ago. And I looked at the books that they were learning out, had mistakes all through. And now I got a learning disability. If I can pick out mistakes, I'm sure that they did, you know. So all of that has to be changed. And we need to provide a system for those of us that are not learning at that level. We need to find a way that we understand how they learn and then exploit that and put them out into the system. Because right now, I always describe our current public education system as the farm system for McDonald's, Walmart, and those places. Not saying they're bad places to work. Don't get me wrong. Trust me, there's a couple places I just mentioned I wouldn't allow anyone to work because I've worked within that system, and I don't think it's the best system in the world. I'll say Walmart again, but I won't mention them by name, and I'll say Walmart again, and I won't mention them by name. And I'm only saying I'm talking from personal experience, and I'm not bashing them because I've watched, at least in the Pennsylvania area, the way that they've treated their employees, and it's short of being the master's house. And we've got a couple people that are in key positions that support that type of behavior, that we oppress our own people in our own employment. So DEI on so many levels. Where do we start with change, and where does the action begin?
Well, I would definitely say, to kind of end where I was talking and coming into this question, one of the experiences that I had in the last couple of years, when the last school year, was like, remember I said I taught history, social studies, best subject ever, please believe
Okay.
it. But when I was teaching the lesson, when I tell you that the content is so whitewashed that they will literally whitewash the Blackness out of history. And with me, I'm a serious history teacher. I believe that history is just like the Bible. You can't take away from it. You can't add to it. It is what it is. It might hurt you and you might love it. It is what it is at the end of the day. And when I tell you that there was a one lesson, well, not lesson, one unit that we were doing, we taught it over 3 weeks. And at the end of the 3 weeks, we had a unit plan, that a unit test that the students had to take. And of course, being a diligent teacher, I'm looking at the unit plan. I'm, reading through the lesson plans that they had set for the students, which is of course one way to teach it to all students of all learning abilities. And so one thing that I noticed is that our social studies lead, who's the social studies person over the entire district, literally said, oh, okay, if you all are behind on your days, like, on your lessons or whatever, and you need a few more days to kind of bring out some of the lessons, you can go ahead and take out, we'll just say the 17th and the 18th. And I think it was maybe 3 days, so 17th, 18th, and 19th. And I'm looking like, and God just spoke a word to me. He was like, Laquita, go look at those days. When I looked at those 3 days, those were days that were specifically on Africa. When I looked at the unit plan, so whatever you're teaching in your 3 weeks of teaching before the unit exam, everything that you teach is supposed to be on the unit exam. When I looked at the unit exam, they did not have any questions on Africa, even though we were talking about the so-called Middle East, we were talking about Europe, and we were talking about Asia, including India and China specifically, like separately.
How,
So
how, how can you talk about the trade system and not involve Africa?
exactly. And then when I looked on the unit exam, there were no questions on there about Africa. And then I'm looking in the face of all of these little Black and brown kids, and I'm just like, how are they seeing themselves in history? That was here, right here in Texas. When I was in Alabama, there were times when I would actually read in the text because our students didn't have books. So the teachers had the books, and then we had to, duplicate the assignments or workbooks or whatever pages. And so I was looking through the book, and I'm like, okay, Europe came into Africa, this part of Africa, and then the African pharaoh was just like, oh, okay, come on, you can rule over us. And like they were okay with it. And it's like, how in the world is that actually true? That you're teaching these little Black and brown kids, mostly Black when I was in Alabama, but these Black and brown kids here in Alabama, that one country came into another country and disposed of the king, and then he was okay with it. It was like, oh, you want to rule? Okay. It's like if somebody come into my house and say, Laquita, this is my house now, I'm taking over. You think I'm just going to sit up here and let them take over my house? And everything that I own is now the property of theirs without fighting back? It absolutely made no sense. So that DEI conversation also comes over into the content that we're teaching it. So you can have a Black teacher like me, I'm Black as night, a Black teacher, I'm culturally sound, I'm a civil rights activist, third generation. So I live and breathe this like the majority of my life. You can have somebody looking like me, but if I go into the school system, they're going to force me to teach this content that doesn't teach true Blackness to Black and brown kids.
They're going to force you to teach the lie, not the truth.
Exactly, because when it comes to these unit exams, and these unit exams is what the entire district is grading, on a district level, they're going to be like, oh, well, the classes that Laquita is teaching, they're not getting all of this wrong, right? They're getting all of these questions wrong. So the problem is not the students or the content. The problem is Laquita. So they will remove me instead of realizing that they have a problem within the content. And when I was here in Texas, and I brought it up to my academic advisor, because they told us, hey, we want to be an anti-racist school. That's another term that they're throwing around now. We want to be anti-racist or whatever. And they told us, if you see anything that is racist in our content, let us know. And I'm like, all right, cool. Because the academic person is over all subjects. So I'm not, yeah, you're going to miss some stuff. I don't mind. I pointed it out to them, and then I pointed it out to the social studies lead, and then they were just like, oh, wow, you found something. Okay, thanks. And I'll deal with it. But then it was never dealt with.
All right. Now, we've covered a lot of information. We're going to wrap up soon. How does someone get in touch with you?
Oh, yes. On my website is www.theempressreigns.com. Yes, I'm the Empress. Yes, and I have a contact us page on there. You can definitely contact me there. You can find me on all social media platforms. Look up Laquita Middleton.
Clubhouse, Facebook, Twitter. And
exactly.
your book is what?
Nappy Minded Ideology.
And where do we find that?
On Amazon.
All right, I'll make sure that everyone has access to that. You can go to RMK Productions and Network on our YouTube page, and there will be a copy of this interview. Quick question. For both young and old listening to this interview, if you had one ask, okay, that you can change anything and one dream can come true, what would that ask? What would that be?
Well, what I would say that I would love to ask of people is stop being people who talk about what the problem is and start being people who make the solution possible. So stop talking about it. Let's be about it.
Talk about it. Let's be about it. All right. you know, I can think about lot of quotes. And before we end, benefits of diversity. We're gonna end with that.
Well, I would say that there are many benefits to diversity. You are able to get more ideas, more diverse and inclusive ideas out there on the table. You can make your company or your school, whatever entity that you're working within, whether it's an organization or such, you can make that more marketable, quote unquote, marketable to your constituents, right? If you're only focusing on one demographic, you might have success in that one demographic, but you can have more success if you open up to a plethora of demographics, whether it's age, whether it's race or ethnic background, whether it's learning ability, whether it's class, social, social class, economic class. You can definitely have more success that way.
And inclusion.
With inclusion, we need to have more people who are not only at the table, but their ideas and their thoughts are included into the conversation about race, about social class, social justice in this country. We don't talk about it a whole lot, but we definitely need to put that on the table and include those ideas of other people who don't look like us.
Equity.
Equity, that is a big one. We have been fighting for it ever since we were forced over here on slave ships. And although I would love to say that we are close to it, we still have a whole long way to go. We definitely need to know that this world was created for all of us, not for some of us. It was not created for, there to be division within us. So we have to get to the point where we can look at our brother to the left, our sister to the right, regardless of who they are or where we're standing, and realize that this person can help me, that person can help me, and we are all equal.
I am so glad you brought that up, because one of the other quotes that I don't remember who said this is diversity is about all of us, and about all of us having to walk through this world together. And I know the first time I was asked about this question, I talked about, higher innovation of people working together. We can send a man to the moon we can send him to outer space for 13 seconds, but can we get him to grow fruit on another planet? Diversity opens up an avenue for people to have a variety of different perspectives, increases creativity. It improves faster problem solving, creates more opportunity for all. It also makes it situations better for us making decisions, and increase productivity, which productivity increases and increases profit. So those of you that are listening to this, is that some of your higher talent, or some of the talent that you're trying to oppress, you look at the many gifts that we have already given to this world. You cannot drive by a street sign or a stoplight and not look up at red, green, or yellow and say, did you know a Black man invented that? All right. You also need to understand the story of John Brown. If you ever gone to Lake Placid, New York, go look at the memorial of John Brown. I don't know, Ms. Middleton, if you know the story of the history of John Brown. I'm going to ask you to tap into that real quick so people will know before they visit Lake Placid and go to the memorial.
Well, the thing is like, I can tell people about history all day and all night, but when you truly learn is when you go out there and find it out yourself. So that's going to be like a real push, a real challenge to people. Look up John Brown. You can look up civil rights, like a subtopic next to it to make sure you get to the right John Brown. But that's going to be something I'm going to push everybody to do.
And I'm going to say to people, because it's going to make you uncomfortable, because when you go to the John Brown Memorial in Lake Placid, New York, every single person, man, woman, or child that has ever been had their life taken unjustly, there is a tombstone recognizing that and sharing the story of John Brown and his sons on how he tried to create diversity and equality by overthrowing a fortress, an ammunition dumpster, and was actually hung and called a traitor for going against a government facility, which January the 6th, we had a group of people did the same thing, and they called them patriots. So when you talk about diversity and inclusion, You look at higher employee engagement, reduced turnover, increased company profile, and their relationship in the community, and also it improves fair housing. So we've covered a lot of information, and I thank all of our listeners for tuning in. I'm going to go back one more time because I want to make sure everyone knows how to get in touch with you, Mrs. Middleton. Will you please let us know how we get access to you?
All right, guys. So my website is theempressreigns.com. I am on Clubhouse. I love it, love it, love it. You can find me by searching Laquita Middleton, or if you want to search by the handle, it is at Empress Laquita. You can find me. Just look for me. I am definitely out there, and I'll look forward to talking with you and working with you.
And I want to say thank you, and I appreciate it because I was doing an experiment with the Aftershock headsets. I picked a product over my $300 Rode mic, and I hopefully the listeners have listened to this sound. This company is an amazing company. They're not sponsors of mine, but I'm in love with the product because it is a jawbone connector. It doesn't go directly into your ear, and I'm going to do a whole episode about the waves in childhood cancer or brain cancer. But we've covered a lot of information, and I think at some point, I hope at some point that you share this episode. Hopefully, some part of this conversation has enlightened you, hasn't touched you, has touched you in a certain kind of way. It changes your view and perspective on this conversation of authentic diversity and inclusion. And the reason why I put authentic in here, because you need to hear the truth. If you have not followed us, I ask you to do so. There's a lot of exciting things coming through RMK Productions, so please subscribe. Share this episode. Go to our webpage, www.rmkproductions.net, and you can email us at info@rmkproductions.net. The name of the podcast is Talking with Kevin and Son. So I just want to thank you, Mrs. Middleton, educator, mother of two wonderful, beautiful queens and twin kings. When they come out together, there's power when you're united. I hope helping other people every day, we unite a group of people to go against the system and improve it for the betterment of all mankind, no matter what your race is, no matter what your economic status is, no matter your level of education, no matter of your choice of gender or however you identify yourself. We can't do this one thing by ourselves. We got to do it together. So use this hashtag, find 1,000 reasons to be kind to someone. And as my grandfather always said, that when you get to a position you can help someone else, it is your duty to do so. Reach one, teach one. We'll fade to black and we're out. Thank you.